Welcome to Diligent Canine on Patreon. Thanks for your support. And today I'm going to talk about how to manage your dog's behavior, or how to start reinforcing, shaping, molding the dog's behavior. So to do that, first we're going to think about how a dog thinks. And to use Mike Ritland's analogy, a dog's mind is kind of like a calculator, so it adds things together. It doesn't really necessarily process reason or do any kind of critical thinking, not in the way that we process it like humans. Okay, they obviously have problem solving skills, but usually they learn through association. So what that looks like is a little equation of like A plus B equals C, and what those letters stand for that you can remember is antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So what does that mean? That means that there's a precursor, say a command or a stimulus. There's a behavior, so the dog performs a certain task, and then there is a consequence, so a positive or negative consequence. Something happens though, so the dog performs the correct behavior, it gets a positive consequence. The dog performs the incorrect behavior, receives a negative consequence. Right? So when you understand that, then you can move on to sort of different types of conditioning. So I guess this video, maybe it'll be titled Behaviorism 101, at least how it pertains to dogs. So in the behaviorist model of psychology, there are two primary forms of conditioning. One is called classical conditioning, and the literal textbook example of this came from a study with dogs. So when a bell would ring, the dogs would learn that food would be brought out. So the experimenters would ring a bell, bring some food out, ring a bell, bring some food out. And pretty soon, the dogs, when they heard the bell, would start to salivate. So the bell would ring, the dogs would drool, food would come. Bell would ring, dogs would drool, food would come. Bell would ring, dogs would drool, no food would come. Bell would ring, dogs would still drool, even if no food came. That's called classical conditioning. And the modern day example that you have probably heard before is clicker training. So especially when you start with the clicker, you have to prime the click or the mark or the bridge, whatever you want to call it. You have to teach the dog what that sound or that symbol represents. So you click, give the dog some food. Click, give the dog some food. Click, give the dog some food. And then when you are, say, doing obedience training, and then you give a command, the dog performs the behavior. You say sit, the dog puts his rear on the ground, you click, and then give him some food. So the dog has learned that the click equals I'm about to get my reward. And this actually works out really well because of the precision and speed of being able to click. What I mean by that is if you've just got treats stuffed in your pocket, and it might take you a minute to like fish them out, okay? And you don't always necessarily want to be carrying a bowl around or a treat pouch or something like that. And that slows down the process, that slows down the repetitions, and it slows down the learning. So clicker training is an example of classical conditioning. Next, we can move into operant conditioning, and what that means is there's an operant or an operator that reinforces the behavior. It sounds complicated, and some of the language here might lose some people, but it is important to understand, at least conceptually, how to apply it to your dog. So if you can imagine a graph with 4 quadrants, on one side we've got positive things, which does not necessarily mean good, it just means things are added, and on the other side we have negative things in which something is removed. So not necessarily bad, just something is removed. Then on the top we have consequences that increase behavior and consequences that decrease behavior. Okay, so adding something, taking away something, decrease behavior, increase behavior. Therefore, when we add something that we want to increase behavior, that is called positive reinforcement. It's the easiest to understand. You give the dog a reward when it does something correctly. And this is really useful. You can teach dogs to do pretty much anything. What is difficult is teaching the dogs what not to do, but we'll get into that later. positive reinforcement means you add something, you add a reinforcer to increase the behavior. So food, play, the dog sits at the back door and you mark it and let the dog out to go to the bathroom. Its reward is being able to go relieve himself. It feels good. Going down then, in our imaginary grid, you're adding something that you want to decrease in behavior. So this is called positive punishment. And what this is say the dog wants to run out the door and you say no, and pop the dog with the leash. You're adding a punishment. Quick note here, I would stay away from using your hands to like do anything like swat the dog's butt or flick their nose, anything like that. Anything that would start to associate your physical contact or touch with pain. I don't think it's a good idea. So if we're following our grid around, then we are on the bottom, so we're decreasing behavior, but now we're removing something. So what would we remove to decrease the behavior? Well, in this example, we would withhold reward. So if the dog goes to the back door when you pick up your keys or something, because it has learned that means you're going to go outside, but the dog won't sit at the door. Even when you give the command, you've taught the dog how to sit. You're expecting it to sit before it goes out, but it doesn't sit. So you withhold the reward of going outside by saying to yourself, not right now. You're going to walk away and you're going to try to get in a couple minutes. If we keep going around to our last quadrant, then we call this negative reinforcement, which a lot of people misuse the word, but literally what it means exactly what I just said. So you're removing something in order to increase a behavior. So in this example, you're teaching the dog how to sit, and you might be applying upward pressure on the dog's leash, on their collar. So you're pulling their head up, and then when the dog's rear drops, you release the pressure on the leash and collar. So the unpleasant stimulus is applied. The dog performs the task that you want it to do. The unpleasant stimulus is removed. So there you have it. We remove something to increase the likelihood of a behavior.